Good morning and welcome to WWDC.
Apple WWDC this year has been conducted on June 22nd. Even during the coronavirus pandemic, Apple has managed to do the WWDC in a very good and interactive way. Simply put, it was a pre-recorded show which was being live streamed. This has given them the opportunity to make the event more interesting and interactive. If you don't have time to watch the full event, or if you simply do not want to watch the event because there are many simple details that you want to know, then this video is the right place for you. Now let's get into the highlights of the event. To start, Tim Cook has addressed Apple's support against racism, and they have also announced their support to the black community by launching a black developer community. Now for the main stuff, Apple this year has announced new software for all the devices. They have announced iOS 14, iPadOS 14, macOS Big Sur, and watchOS 7. Now macOS Big Sur, when compared to all other OS that was launched in the event, I'd say is the most redesigned one among them all. And yet one of the most important announcement at the event was their transition from Intel Silicon to Apple's very own silicon. In short, this was what happened at Apple WWDC. Now let's get into the details. Now let's start with iOS 14. iOS 14 this year has brought a lot of new changes to the whole iOS ecosystem. First thing, App Library. It is a new feature in iOS. It helps you keep apps in an organized and a folder view. It shows you the suggested apps, the apps that you're likely to open next, and also shows all the alphabetical order apps. Now to support this, they have brought in another new feature, and that is hiding pages. You can now hide pages in iOS so that you can access the app library easily. Now the app library is in the far right after all the pages, so if you want to access it, you can hide all the pages that you're not likely to use next. Another good thing about this feature is that you can hide the apps that you're not likely to use more often, and you don't want to even uninstall the apps. Number 2, widgets. Yes, you heard it right, widgets is finally here in iOS. You can have widgets in the home screen between the apps. To do this, you can hold down the home screen and get into the jiggle mode, as what Craig Federighi said. But yeah, in the mode there's a plus sign in which you can access all your widgets. And the widgets are all cool. Each of the widgets have almost 3 sizes for them. Yeah, now the widgets run for Apple native apps. Yeah, and we can expect that in the far future there will be support for every third-party app. Then there is this one widget called Smart Stack. What it does is that it changes the widgets according to the time of the day. So when you're up in the morning, you can access all your calendar for checking out your appointments, your schedule and all that. And in the evening, after all your work is done, it will show your activity feed for checking out your fitness. And by the way, the activity app is now renamed to Fitness. Third one is Picture in Picture. Now this is a very common feature for Android users. So picture in picture is when you want to see a video and then you want to exit but don't want to pause the video. In short, playing the video in the background would be the right tone for it. You can do it by just swiping up the home key gesture, which will not pause the video but will play it in a small window. Now you can move the window around, which is very handy of course. Yeah, and if you don't want to see the visual thing which interrupts you for some reason, then you can just slide it to the side, which will help you hear the audio but not see the visuals. It's pretty cool according to me. What is very interesting is that these were all the features which Android had like 4 or 5 years ago, and iOS is a bit back when doing these things. But I'd say even if you're late, just do it. It's better than not doing anything. And Siri. We can't forget Siri, right? Now, Apple this year has brought a few changes to Siri. The main change is that it won't visually interrupt you anymore. Meaning that if you're triggering Siri and if you want to use Siri, what you usually see is a big screen with Siri filled in. You won't have that experience anymore because Siri now will only appear as a small circle Siri icon in the bottom of your home screen. So, no more visual interruptions, which is actually a good thing. Again, Google Pixel did that, right? Yeah, now Siri has like 20 times more facts, meaning that it can answer most of your question without saying, here's what I found. That's totally cool. And then a big bump that they brought in was on-device translation, meaning that it's some feature like Google Translate, but you can work it offline and it will be on your device. As of now, it supports like 11 languages, but Apple said that they'll be adding new languages as they go. iMessage also got some new features. You can now pin some conversations if that is very important, or if you're frequently contacting someone, you can pin their name and then it will appear on the top of your screen. And also now you can do specific replies for a specific question. This is inline replies as what Apple says, because you can reply to a specific question, and that's very cool. And now you can mention people by just typing their name before your message. And then Apple Map has got a few bug improvements and some new maps, and it brought in some new countries supported by Apple Maps. And also Apple Maps now have a cycling mode dedicated for cycling, which will show you the hike and the falls which you'll encounter, and it will also show you the places with staircases so that you can prepare to get out of your bike and then carry it. And now there's this dedicated EV routing mode. What this does is that if you specify the specific model of your electric vehicle, it will find the roads with the charger for your electric vehicle, so that you don't have to worry about finishing your range. And then there's this thing called digital car keys. So even if you forgot your keys, you can access your car with your phone. The first car to come out with this feature will be the 2021 BMW 5 Series. Apple has also said that they'll be cooperating with other brands to bring in this feature. And you can also share your car key via iMessage to, your son, your husband, whoever it might be. You can share your car keys. And the cool thing is that you can set restrictions so that they don't completely take control of the car. Or you can give full control if you fully trust the person. And then there is this app clips feature, and this is kind of like the instant apps but a much more better version. App clips is a feature if you don't have a full app for a specific thing. So if you head to a cafe, they have an app, and if you don't have the app, there'll be this something called app clip tag. So if you get your phone near the app clip tab, it does all the NFC stuff, and then you can use that specific portion of the app for ordering food, taking any rental things. You can do all that, and that's very cool. And that pretty much wraps up iOS 14. Now let's get into iPadOS. iPadOS 14 has all the improvements that iOS 14 brought in, plus some others. Like now Siri won't be in the bottom of the screen but in the bottom corner of the screen. And then there are some software improvements for things like Apple Pencil. Let's look at that. Apple Pencil software has now this feature called Scribble. In any text field, if you want to write anything, you can do that now. And now it also recognizes handwriting, meaning that you can select your handwriting, you can cut it, you can paste it, do whatever you want. And that is what is new with iPadOS 14. Now, don't think that iPadOS doesn't bring in much other features. This is what just Apple announced on the stage. And I'm pretty much sure that there are some other features which Apple didn't announce because they didn't have sufficient time for that. Talking about software improvements, AirPods now has also got this amazing, update. It's called Spatial Audio. Spatial Audio is kind of like the Dolby Atmos from Apple. Now the thing is that if you have an AirPods Pro, you can experience this. It brings in a specific 3D 360 degree kind of audio experience by controlling the frequency of audio. And now this has this very cool automatic reconnecting feature. So if you have to put down your iPhone down and then take your iPad, it'll automatically connect to your iPad without you have to doing anything. Now let's get into watchOS 7. Firstly, now it detects when you wash your hands with soap. It uses a microphone for detecting the soap and water sound. So now it is very cool that it will bring down a countdown from 20 to 0. So that you'll exactly know how much time you have to wash your hands. Very appropriate in 2020. You can now customize your watch face and even share the watch face to your friends and family through iMessage. And now Apple Watch can detect dancing and dance movements. And now it has this one feature called Wind Down, which helps you sleep better. So what it does is that when you approach the bedtime that you set, it'll automatically dim down your Apple Watch and your other devices which is interconnected. And if you connect your display or your lights from your home app, it will automatically change the tone to more warm that you don't have to encounter with blue light, which will interrupt your sleep very much. If you didn't know, it's a fact that blue light can affect your sleep that comes out of the display. And yet, one of the most amazing and cool announcement was the privacy features. All the new versions that Apple announced in the WWDC has some amazing privacy features. You can now control the tracking and the privacy feature for the liking of your heart. Firstly, you can set what the app tracks and what the app can't track. And in the App Store, it now shows you before installing an app what the app will track on device and what it will send to the server. And the app has to now ask you before you can do any kind of tracking. Now let's get into one of the most redesigned things in WWDC, and that is introducing macOS 11 Big Sur. You heard me right, it is not macOS 10.x.x anymore, it is macOS 11. I don't know why is it macOS 11, maybe they want to show that it is a huge jump for the previous version. But anyway, it brings in a lot new features which I have mixed feelings about. Let me show you why. First thing, the design. Big Sur brings in more rounded corners for everything, including the taskbar, including the dock, including every icons. It is now more rounded and a fresh look, if you will. Honestly, I think I don't like some new logos, like the Finder logo is now more rounded. I like it. The Safari logo now has a 3D look. I like it. iMessage has now this 3D look. Other apps has now this 3D look. I like them all. But what I didn't like is the Final Cut Pro logo. It looks terrible. I don't like it that much. And Safari now has got extension support, which means you can dump in every of your extensions for the favorite service that you use, meaning that they are trying to bring in more control over your Safari experience. And Safari also brings in new privacy features like what the website can track, what not to track, like allow once for tracking or completely permit this website for tracking. It has many other features too. Now I mentioned that macOS 11 Big Sur was a big update, right? You wanna know what is even bigger? It is a transition from Intel chips to Apple's very own chipsets. Now I have previously made a feature about why Apple is switching and why should you consider and why should you care. If you want to watch that video, click in the top right corner so that you will be directed to that video. In the event, Apple showed up a Mac with Apple's A12Z Bionic chip, which is the same chip as in the iPad Pro. So the Apple A12Z Bionic chip is very powerful and they showed off in a Mac, and it's not very certain if that is a chip that we are going to see in every of the Macs. And now developers can either optimize their apps for Intel chips or Apple's new ARM based chips. And they can do it straight in Xcode. You have all the tools for optimizing your apps for both environments in Xcode. And Apple now gives developers an option to get the Mac Mini with the new A12Z Bionic chip inside it. Apple announced that the first Mac with Apple Silicon will be out later by the end of this year. And the CEO Tim Cook said that the full transition would take about 2 years, which I think is pretty reasonable. Apple also mentioned that they won't be stopping support for the old Intel-based Macs. The Intel Macs will still get support for the new macOS, and Apple also said that they have some new Intel-based Macs on the pipeline. We don't know about that yet, but still, that 2-year transition is pretty big for Apple. So maybe in that time they'll be releasing a new Mac with all Intel chips. For all the operating system, the software beta has started on the day of WWDC, which is 22nd of June. And for the public beta, you'll have to wait for the starting of July. And every of these updates will be stable and will be available for every person in the fall. That's all about WWDC this year. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share this video so that others will know what happened at WWDC. Lastly, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already and press the bell icon so that you'll get updated for every of my future videos. And until we meet the next time, goodbye.